So we have some panelists today. I want to make sure some people have to hop off the call. So we want to make sure that we're cognizant of people's time. I know it's day 2 of the semester, and so we're all super busy. I know we are at the Career Center. Things are really moving along. So without further ado, I want to welcome you guys to our session today. It was kind of consulting fall recruitment process. And so today, we're not going to get too much in the weeds on like technical prep, anything like that. We really want to give you that big 30,000 foot view of the fall recruitment cycle for the year of COVID. And, you know, there's some adjustments and how you might handle that. And so this evening, we're just going to start out with the student panel, and I'll facilitate a little bit with some questions for our panelists, which we'll get into in just a second. And certainly if you have questions, you can pop those in the chat. There's going to be quite a few people on the call, so we won't really be able to do it, people like raising your hand or anything like that. And then the second part is my colleague Ann Matthews is on the call, part of our employer relations team. And she's awesome. She and I have been working very diligently to create some information for you so you can stay on top of like these fluid deadlines, what firms are coming. And so she can really she's going to take us through a deep dive on what we know right now. Now, all this stuff is very fluid. It can change in a moment's notice, but what we know as of, 5 o'clock today. And in the end, we're just going to talk a little bit about resources and where you might go to if you're pursuing this recruitment process in terms of preparation materials. And so I'll also ask the panelists today. So we have 5 students working with us today. So Amanda, Daniel, Justin, Sterling, and Sam. And they each, I'm gonna kind of ask them individually to kind of introduce themselves. So what I would like the panelists to do is when I call your name, just kind of introduce yourself, what your major is, where you spent the summer, and then one kind of surprising insight that you got from your summer experience. And let's start with Amanda, if she's on the call.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Amanda. I'm an HOD major and double majoring in econ, and I am a senior. I spent the summer at McKinsey in the Dallas office. And one thing that surprised me was probably the extent that even in a virtual environment, I got really close with my team and was able to have a good time spending time and getting close with my team, even through Zoom.
I think that's going to be a theme for us, is that the virtual pivot that people had to make and what that looked like. Daniel, if you're on the call, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Ethan. Yeah, my name is Daniel Mativo. I'm a senior. I'm an HOD major. I spent the summer at BCG in Atlanta. And I would say one interesting thing I learned this summer is that there are certain things I enjoy doing by myself, like more than with other people, which if you know me is like pretty weird. Like I'm very extroverted. So that was a new discovery.
Excellent. I love that self-awareness, like through your internship process. Sam, what do you have to say?
Hey everyone, I'm Sam. I'm a senior. I'm an HOD major with business and econ minors, and I spent the summer with KPMG in the Chicago office. And one really surprising thing that I found was that even though they kind of gave us like a program to work with, there was still like a ton of freedom with how you did things. So I think going into this like virtual kind of environment, you can still totally like make it your own and make it great, even if there does seem to be like a pretty rigid structure to things.
Perfect. Sterling.
Hey guys, can you guys see? Okay, cool. I'm Sterling. I'm also a senior. I'm an anthropology and communication of science, engineering, and technology double major, and I spent my summer with Daniel at BCG Atlanta. I think one thing that really surprised me is that I come from a very non-traditional background, and I thought that I would be at a big disadvantage because of that. And in reality, I think my team found ways to bring in my strengths, and I also was able to like really quickly pick up some of those skills that I thought that I didn't have. So that was nice and a nice surprise.
Excellent. I want to circle back to that because I think that's a key point that Sterling made about being interesting or bringing your whatever the background is, you own it. People come to consulting from lots of different backgrounds, and so they appreciate that. It doesn't all have to be, you know, a prescriptive path. That's super cool. Justin.
Hey guys, my name is Justin Forsman. I'm also a senior. I'm a double major in HOD and philosophy, and I spent the summer at EY New York. Something that surprised me, I think, was that networking does not stop once you start the job. In fact, it probably becomes more important. Happy to talk about that later or with anyone else in private. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are going to be interesting tidbits that you guys can take away today. So that thing, we're going to talk about networking, not only to get the gig, but once you're there to get assigned to projects or to move around, you know, it never ends. So, you know, learn the skill now in the confines of Vanderbilt with all your friends around you, and then you're still going to have to keep working those angles. So the first question I have for the panelists, and I'll kind of ask you individually to respond, it'd probably be easier that way, is I know as a coach, and you probably get that too, your peers approach you, is students will often say, I'm interested in consulting, and, you know, granted on our campus, it is a bit of a default, lots of students talking about it, which is fine, and it's a good fit for some people, but not everybody. But often students will say, you know, consulting, I'm really interested in solving problems and working on teams. But it is an intense process to go through this fall recruitment process. And so I'm getting a lot of students saying, like, should I go through this process? Is it worth it? So I'd love for each of you to kind of give me your kind of quote unquote consulting story. How did you arrive at that decision to go through this fairly intensive process? And then, you know, what drove you to want to kind of go through with it? And is consulting, you know, that team and problem solving, and what else is involved? So I'll start with Sam.
All right. Okay, so we're going through the process and then how we kind of like stuck with it, right?
Yeah, like how did you arrive at consulting, like that you would like to pursue this and to kind of go through the you know, preparatory process, the different networking. I mean, it is, admittedly, it's a hyper competitive environment, and it takes a level of prep. So how did you arrive at this idea of consulting for yourself, and then without getting in the weeds on how you prepared?
Totally. Yeah, sure. So I actually spent the summer after my sophomore year abroad. So I didn't really have access to like a lot of people to like case with or do anything like that. So I basically just like hit the ground running junior year when I came to campus. I started at Vandy being really interested in finance. And I've always had a passion for restaurants and cooking. So for me, it was like that awesome interpersonal aspect that you get from like the restaurant business. And then I really enjoyed the like quantitative aspect of like the work I did in finance. So those things kind of came together with the problem solving piece, like you said, to want to get into consulting. And so I attended this exact like session last year, and then just kind of followed the advice and tried to get whatever I could and put my best foot forward. And I think it worked out well. And I think for what people say about consulting, I think the problem solving kind of team nature of it is definitely true.
Excellent. Sterling.
Okay, so that's a big question. And I came into consulting sort of late, in the sense that it was really going into junior year that I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go through with this. And I think my mindset was very much, I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to start at the beginning. I'm going to do the prep. I'm going to do the legwork. I'm going to do the networking, and then kind of take it just day by day. If I ever feel like it's not working, or if I feel like it's too much, then I'm just going to bow out. And so I kind of tried to keep those checks in place for myself of, am I still enjoying the process? Am I enjoying the interviews? Am I enjoying the people that I'm talking to and meeting? Because I felt like if I wasn't, then consulting probably wasn't right for me. And that really helped. It made the recruitment process feel a lot more seamless. It helped me pretty quickly identify places I felt comfortable versus places that I didn't think were for me. And I think that's true vice versa as well. Firms can help figure out, are you the right fit? Are you not? And I just had a lot of trust in that process and trusted myself in terms of like, day by day, I'm enjoying this. I'm happy. This is still what I want to be spending my time doing. And that was held pretty true from beginning to end, which gave me a lot of confidence going into the summer. Like, yes, I really have thought about this a lot. And for me, like the few little sticking points where I knew I've always been passionate about people. And I also knew that I don't mind the fact that I don't know what I want to do in life. And consulting is a really great place to work with people, to have that team environment, and also to build that baseline skill set that I could apply in any direction. So it wasn't going to limit me in any way. It was just like one more opportunity. And so that was my thought process. And definitely that's what held true for me in terms of like continuing with the process, and then definitely held true this summer. I loved my summer, and I think it's because my summer was in a lot of ways what I expected in terms of giving me that skill set, but also something that I really enjoyed doing every day.
I love that. I think it's a super healthy perspective. And I think any of you on the call, as you're kind of contemplating this, just what Sterling says, like, am I still, I mean, it's intense, but am I enjoying the conversations, the people that I'm engaged with, the process of prepping for cases? That's a good indicator, you know, like, do I like thinking in this way? And so I appreciate your thoughts on that. Daniel.
So I guess for me, I guess similar to Sterling and Sam, I also came into consulting pretty late. I had originally, like, I had worked in different like creative fields for a long time. But eventually I worked like on the business end of like a music marketing company. And I realized I really like strategy and just learning about business and things like that. And that's what got me interested in consulting. And I think similar to what Sterling was saying, like as like the process went on and as we like went through like case studying and like all that kind of intensive prep, I realized like consulting is like a never ending like learning curve. Like there's always room to grow, and I really enjoy that. Like I'm really about like self-development and growth. And I just saw it as like a great launching point for like anything you want to do. Like it just helps you like grow and like learn and become a better person, like a better business person. So that's kind of what attracted me to it.
Outstanding. I think we're seeing a theme here as people like, you know, sometimes I feel like students are like, well, I don't have any business background. I feel like I'm late to the game. I mean, everyone, if you put in the energy and you think like a consultant, you can be a viable candidate. And so it's like taking the experience you have and tailoring that and being able to articulate that to people. So within this recruitment cycle. Justin.
Yeah, I think my story is going to be pretty similar to everybody else's. I was also late to consulting at the beginning of my junior year. I had done an internship with Coach the summer before, and I found out that I really did not like fashion, but I really liked the business problems that I was able to work on. And I kind of talked to my boss about that at the time. She was like, oh, you should look into consulting. So that's how I kind of entered it, and I did it really late also. In terms of the important aspects of, you know, being on the job, I think teamwork is I mean, it's a buzzword, but it's really important, and it's different from like the teamwork that we work on in, you know, class projects and stuff like that. Like you're going to be working with your team a lot, and you have to be really comfortable interfacing with people that you maybe don't know that well, like including clients and teammates that like could disagree with you. It's just a lot of interfacing with other people, which was not something that I had really done before. So it was definitely an adjustment, but yeah, loving talking to people is, I think, a necessity for consulting.
Excellent. Amanda.
Yeah, so just to really echo a lot of what everyone else has said, I think I, like most people who go into consulting, I had no idea what I wanted to do, whether it be like industry or function wise. And consulting is a really great way to get you to explore all of those, because it's very project based. Like you'll be on something for a couple months and then you get to try something completely different. So that was really the main thing that drew me to it. And I think another thing is with the recruiting process, like a thing that I had heard was that if you don't like the recruiting process, if you hate running cases and you hate networking, then you definitely won't like the job either. So not to say that any of them are really fun, but it's a good indicator of what a lot of what goes on in the job itself is like.
And so building on that, Amanda, I'll just kind of pivot to my next question. Usually we cite kind of at those two areas that you just mentioned, like case prep and the network or connecting with people who are working consultants or somebody like you who's been through the process. What did that look like for you in the lead up to last fall when you were going through that process? Because I think it's really important for students. I want to hear everybody's story, but I think there really is a spectrum of where you can be. So some people run, network with, 50 people and they're running 30 cases, and other people, like, I just done a few cases. I feel pretty good about it. I've just talked to one person at each, at the firm I'm interested in, and things have, progressed and I got traction. So there's this wide range. And while it is intense, I don't want to make it feel like it's, it's 7 years of medical school or something like that. So what did the process look like for you, and how did you kind of set up your plan?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah. We'll start with you, Amanda.
Yeah, so I started thinking I was interested in consulting like second semester of my sophomore year, but I didn't start really doing anything about it until like the summer before my junior year. And at that point, a lot of people don't like the books, like there's Case in Point, but I actually really found those to be really helpful. So that's a good place to start. That's what I did, learning how to case. I think sort of watching cases is a good place to start. And then towards the end of the summer, I reached out to friends who were also interested and started having case buddies that you would case each other every week. I think that's the best way to do, is just get hands-on practice with casing. And then in terms of networking, it's really easy for networking to feel forced. So I really just tried to, rather than getting a quantity of connections in firms I was interested in, more so making a couple connections that I think can be pretty meaningful, and then continuing to foster those connections and build those relationships all into the recruiting season of September and October.
And just a follow-up, Amanda, so once you had your kind of baseline understanding of casing, did you feel like you needed some kind of targeted understanding of how each firm approaches the case process, or how did you navigate that piece? Did you talk to other, did you go to some events? I know you were at McKinsey, so did you go to some McKinsey events where they kind of outlined for you hey, our casing is a little bit different in the approach, or how did you navigate that?
Yeah, definitely. So going to info sessions is probably the most helpful thing. You can also research pretty easily. There's candidate-led style cases and interviewer style cases, and then some cases are just behavioral, and some are more strategy. So that's really something that you can also research, but will be discussed in information sessions usually as well.
Great. Daniel, what's your process look like?
So for me, I started the summer before my junior year. I went through this process. It's this group called Modern Guild. And they have a consulting jumpstart kind of process that they help with. I mean, it was an online course, so I did that. And after that, I realized that basically just helped with casing. And from that, I was really just focused on casing. Networking wise, I wouldn't do what I did, just because I really did the opposite of Amanda. I just talked to as many people as I could. But I never talked to anybody more than once. And in hindsight, that really wasn't the best way to go about things. But for me, I was just really focused on casing. So after I did that, I would just live case. Me and one of my friends were buddies. So we would live case each other once a day for the month of August. And then after that, it was just recruitment, going to the actual interviews and things like that.
So I just, as a follow-up, Daniel, I'm super interested now. When you said, so you went crazy on the networking, if I understand you correctly, you just talked to a bunch of people, but you only did it once. So that's one distinction, is playing a numbers game versus actually building a rapport with somebody and hopefully that they'll advocate for you from within the organization. Is that what, the tweak that if you could go and do it over again that you would make?
Yeah, if I would do it over again, I would do more what Amanda did. And just try to create more connections. Also because when I talk to someone once, it's harder to get a feel of what each organization is like. And so I feel like I didn't really know fully like what each organization was like before I like wrote my cover letter and like went through, like I read what it said online, but I still didn't really have like the best feel for it. But I feel like if you have a better connection with other people, like you have a better feel for what the culture is like, which is not just good for like your chances of applying, but also just good for like if you actually want to be there.
Outstanding. I love that because in our coaching practice at the Career Center, we talk often about, talking to people at a firm is going to help you in your interviews. It's going to help you on your cover letter. And when they ask you, why do you want to work for this firm? You're going to be able to answer that more robustly than just saying, well, you don't want to sound like scripted or like a robot when they ask you why this firm. Justin, what's your prep story look like?
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna harp on what the other two have said so far. So I'll start on the networking side. I think the most important thing you can do during networking is make sure you're doing it for yourself. So asking questions that you actually care about, asking them real questions rather than, whatever you find on the internet is really important because they're people that want to talk to you and want to like give you good advice rather than just give you like you said, just written answers. So making sure you're asking questions that you actually care about, like about offices or about the actual firm's culture, like Daniel was saying, I think is really important. And then on the other side, I mean, for me, casing was much more important. It was the much more intimidating piece for it of the recruitment process. So I guess my mentality towards that was like I looked up just how cases are formatted in the beginning, and then I really went away from the internet and just kind of did it on my own. You shouldn't look for the one fits all type of framework. It doesn't really exist. So I would say just be creative and be flexible. That's really what they're looking for, and yeah, just show your strengths through that.
Excellent. Sterling.
Yeah, so for me, I would say starting at the networking piece, I was more in line with Amanda. So I tried to get to know like one or two people well at the firm, but at least have one of those two people be higher than just like a summer associate who just finished or like a first year analyst. Like starting at the first year analyst is great, or somebody that is awesome, but then knowing the recruiter and knowing somebody in the firm who's a little bit higher up who may be involved in the recruitment team who can advocate for you. I tried my best to find somebody who kind of fit that mold, who I also connected with. And I think one thing is that it's okay to drop connections. Like Daniel said, if you talk to somebody and you don't really connect, but you want to try somebody else at the firm, that's okay. So it's okay to walk away from a connection and try in favor of trying to find one that you do build that closer relationship with, because I think it does help give you a really good sense of the firm, which was definitely my experience. In terms of casing, for me, that was definitely something that I was weaker on. Mental math was something I was weaker on. I would say the case books themselves put a lot of pressure on being able to do mental math perfectly. I don't think there was a single case that I didn't at least mess up the math a little bit, but just like working on saying things confidently, taking that feedback, recognizing if something was wrong was really what I worked on. I think in hindsight, I probably could have done a little bit more legwork on that than I did. So I think that was something that I would have put a little bit more effort in. Is I think I probably cased total maybe like 20 or 25 times, which is probably pretty low in terms of spreading it out over the month. So maybe a little bit more emphasis, but not too much more. And then one other thing I would say is I really thought about and worked on building my story. So especially because I don't have a business background, when people asked me about my resume that I was talking to or in an interview, I worked really hard to have or really thought about like, this is my background. It isn't normal in terms of like, it isn't your typical business, which is totally fine. But here's who I am, here's my story, and here's my why consulting because of that. And I think that is something that really helped me and kind of helped me stand out, was that not only did I have a unique background, but I had really been thoughtful about what that background was going to give me and offer to the firm and like offer to me in the job. So that's something else I would really think about, is who are you and why for you and your background is this something that you really want to do?
I love that. So we harp on that all the time. It's really being able to articulate your individual story. What are your strengths and how does it match up with this, in this case, the consulting industry. One thing I mean, I'm curious about Sterling, because we often, when we're talking about networking, students will say, well, let's use BCG as an example. If you network with somebody at the Atlanta office, usually that's going to be important, because like if I know they're recruiting for Atlanta, you know, it's going to be somebody in the Atlanta office who can move the needle for me a little bit, versus if I network with somebody in Atlanta, but I really want to work in San Francisco, it really doesn't, most firms, it doesn't work very well like that. Like they could give you some insights about culture, but they really can't, you know, help you out too much with that team in San Francisco. And so, again, there's some differences in the firms, but generally speaking, the closer you can get to the office that you know, where you know they're going to recruit for or that you want to be, that's an important element of when you're reaching out to these one or two people. Sam.
Sure. So I think kind of, Ethan, going off what you just said with the location thing in partnership with my like networking strategy, I think for me, like figuring out, you know, with the location and fitting that into what Sterling was saying with kind of developing your personal story, I think even before the kind of interviews happen and you are selected and you get to tell your story in a more formal setting, I think that should be like one of the very first things that you put together, because that can help you decide if consulting really is right for you. Because if you don't see your personal story fitting in with the general model of consulting, probably isn't a good fit. And then along with that, with the networking, would definitely recommend trying to make a few more close personal connections at companies rather than meeting a ton of different people. The more I think you can get on like a deeper level with those people, you know, getting articles from them about like, you know, thought pieces from the company, or like, you know, their really personal insight on what's going on will translate directly into your answer for why do you want to work for, you know, KPMG, for example. You can really kind of dive into that and show why you're a unique candidate. And then as for casing, I was super, super afraid of casing. Honestly, it's a super daunting process. You know, everyone talks about the big bad case interview. And I think like my biggest piece of advice is like the scariest case interview you practice is the first one. So like, if you can just find anything that'll get you over that kind of fear, whether it's like, I think watching a video of someone doing a case interview is a great way to get started. I know there are some great ones on YouTube from various companies that recruited Vandy. So doing that, and then just trying to find a buddy and getting together and just trying to solve some problems. If you find that casing is pretty fun, that should translate somewhat to the interview, and then just give it your best shot and see where it goes from there.
Can I add one thing to that? What Sam
yeah.
said. I also think it is okay. A lot of, obviously this is something that's super popular at Vandy. So there are a lot of people like the five of us who have been through this process. And I really relied a lot on the people who had done it before, who were on campus, to help me run a few cases after I'd kind of gotten my feet under me. Use that. Even if you don't know somebody, reach out to me. So many people helped me that I think that's part of the Vandy culture, is to turn around and pay that back. Do that, because it does help, and it's just something that people want to do. So use that.
Yeah,
I think
I just want to add, I think that's a bigger thing with like all of consulting, is like people who are in consulting want to give back to people who want to get into consulting. So please, like, if you're interested, like about something that I've said or something I think one of the other panelists have said, like reach out. We would love to chat. I definitely would love to talk to any of y'all.
One of the things that you guys said about casing, I think is really important, is like finding a buddy, because casing is really a conversation and it's a back and forth. So yeah, you can get in the, different books or modules or videos, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to, articulate your thoughts clearly and succinctly to another person in a room. And so you want to have that back and forth. And so even if it doesn't have to be an older student who's been, a veteran of the process, or somebody who's actually working consultant, it could be a buddy, or you both decide, hey, we're going to go through this together. or even another student who isn't going through the consulting process, but just said, hey, can you ask me these questions and just let me get some response time in. So it's really very important to have that back and forth. I want to be cognizant of our time. It's right at 5:30. Then, so we said that the student panel is going to be 30 minutes. And I'm going to just close with this last question for the panelists. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do like a big question and answer with you guys. I really appreciate you taking the time today. But I know probably a lot of second year students, sophomores are on the call. So I'd love to, if you had a piece of advice. So these are students who are thinking like, hey, I got to get that consulting gig this summer in order to be where you guys are. What would be one piece of advice that you would give to newly minted second year student who's thinking, they're interested in consulting in terms of gaining some experience? So I know you guys have like Daniel's, he really leveraged a lot of his experience on campus, like RA, he got an internship at Owen, and looking at things like on campus or alternative type experiences. So what I would love to, for each of you, just to give me as a last roll call here, some advice to a second year student who's kind of projecting out and how they might gain experience. So we'll start with Sam, since you kind of ended us, and we'll roll back up the line.
Okay, sure. I think, and I've been telling this to the few freshmen that I've been able to meet recently, and I think it still applies to the beginning of sophomore year, especially with the virtual org fair coming up on Friday. If you think there's an organization that you would be really interested in, join, like give it a shot, apply, like don't be afraid. I know things are kind of busy right now, but give it your best shot if you can, because the portions of the like behavioral side of the interview, which is a big part of consulting, it's a lot of interpersonal interactions, is like being able to talk passionately about something. And if you find a new org that you're really passionate about, that'll translate into some behavioral interview question answers, and you'll feel really good about them because like it's deep and true, like within your own mind. And so that will be like projected and like received well by like a potential interviewer. So like go out there, try something new.
Great. I know Amanda, she maybe have hopped off to go to class, but if you're on the call, Amanda, you got your 10-second advice for second year students?
Oh yeah, she left for her class.
Okay. Hey, all right, Daniel, you go ahead. What you got?
I guess kind of very similar to what Sam said. Just like do something that you enjoy and like you actually care about, but also to kind of add to it, give yourself like the opportunity to do your best at it. Like I know for me, I get into a lot of situations where like I'm too busy and I can't really do my best at anything because I have like too many responsibilities that I have to like hit the bare minimum in the check marks. But like if you're in a situation like that, my best advice would be like get out of things that you don't want to prioritize and like really do your best at like one or two things you really care about. Ultimately, like just learning like what that feels like and like how much you can do is really going to help you when you're doing casing and like working through the consulting interviews. Because I mean, ultimately, like when these consulting companies are hiring undergrads or like people straight out of undergrad, it really is like an investment for them. Like it takes us like a year or two to be particularly helpful. So they're really looking for people who really are like confident and like know like, oh, like I'm going to be like a worthwhile investment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, you're spot on there. I think it's what we often say is depth over breadth. So we don't, so pick those 3 activities and go deep, 1, 2, or 3, not, joining 15 things and just being a member. So it's really to be able to share your story and to, as Daniel says, to give your best self and to really take ownership and to show an impact that you can have. You're going to want to go deep rather than wide. All right, great. Justin.
Yeah, Ethan, I really like what you said there about depth over breadth. And I think another way to say that is quality over quantity. So I think really working smartly is more important than just spending a bunch of time doing like pseudo casing. So for example, I think it's really important for especially the people applying this round to do Zoom casing instead of like in-person casing. Normally I would say simulate, in-person casing because that's what it's going to be like, but that's not what it's going to be like this year. So Zoom casing is something that I would really suggest. other than that, I mean, I think broadly, I think it's really important to not be afraid to go against the grain. I mean, I think most people here kind of came from unorthodox backgrounds to consulting. And like, even if you start doing consulting and end up not liking it, I know there's like a lot of Vanderbilt pressure to go into consulting. A lot of people in Vanderbilt go into consulting. So if you do it and you start not liking it, that's completely fine as well.
Outstanding. Sterling.
Okay, I'm going to try. I agree with everything that they said. I think I'm going to try to say two different things. One, that's just like very tactical, is try your best to keep your GPA up. Like that helps more than I think anybody knows. So like do your best in school because that really does make a difference. And then the second piece of advice is, and this is true, like junior year, when you're about to start this process, like reflect and do this, but your first year and sophomores, definitely do this. If you're in a class and like you have a huge team project that you're gonna have to work on, or you're working an internship and like you are thinking about, you have all of these different little things that you're doing. Take notes about what you're doing, like what your role has been and what you've learned from it and what you're taking away from it. And if you can just like keep a running list on your laptop, when you get to junior year and you have to like write your resume and tell your story, you don't have to try to remember all the things that you did and how you felt and what you learned. You have a tangible record of that makes it very transferable to prep for interview. And I didn't do that. And that is something that I think would have helped a lot. So if you can do that, keep a running list. I think that will help you no matter if you do consulting or not, whatever you decide to apply for or go into graduate school, research, anything, like having a record of that will make it very, very easy to do. So that's my tangible piece of advice.
Hey, I thank all our panelists. As you can see, these are really interesting people, and that's what firms are looking for. So yes, as Sterling says, you want to really, some of the metrics are, do well. So if you're doing a triple major and you're underwater a bit, they don't really care about triple major. They want you to, do well. So if it's addition through subtraction, then that's probably a good thing for you. But all of our panelists, I thank you so much. You guys are welcome to stay or hop off the call. We're going to pivot now to my colleague, Ann Matthews with Employer Relations. We're going to get in the weeds a little bit about this fall, what it's going to look like, firms, dates, and those kinds of things. So thanks again to all the panelists. It really makes, I can see the energy of paying it forward. Ann?
Thanks, panelists. Y'all were awesome. I'm going to pivot and pull up a document on here that Ethan sent you all earlier. Hang on one second. All right. So this document really gives an overview of what the firms are doing on campus this fall or virtually this fall. Caveat here is that while this information is current, it can change. So always, always, always double check doorways for the most up-to-date information. Don't rely on this sheet. It's just a guideline to give you an overview of what's to come. So before we get started, I want to give a couple of quick definitions of what some of these events mean. So oftentimes we refer to events as information sessions, even if they're a workshop or a panel or something of the sort. And essentially that just means that you'll probably learn about a day in the life. You might learn about a skill, or you might learn something technical that you can take with you from the session. And you'll also have a great opportunity to network with company representatives. Coffee chats are small group or one-on-one interactions with employers. They'll have different lines of the business represented, and you may be able to talk to that particular line and be a little bit more specialized or targeted in your approach. Career fair is, we typically have a few career fairs each academic year. And this year we have 2 virtual fairs for this fall, the engineering career fair and the all majors career fair. 3 to 4 will be a senior only hour. I know most of you are not seniors, so please plan to join between the hours of 4 and 8 Central Time. And those will be virtual and located in doorways. So just to kind of quickly go through what some of this means, McKinsey is this week. They'll have a lot of events coming up on Thursday and Friday. And you can see their application deadlines and interviews. Bain is the following week, I believe. And they have a couple of different information session options. So you see that one on August 31st. BCG, they've actually just submitted quite a few more events. So be sure to check those out in Doorways. Those will be uploaded in the next day or two. Deloitte. So Deloitte's not super clear in Doorways right now what they're doing. But from conversations I've had with them, they're really recruiting through two separate routes this year. They've got commercial and GPS, which is their government public service group. And within both of those groups, they're going to probably only have one job posting available. Now, you may know that Deloitte recruits for lots of different roles that are more specialized, like strategy and operations, human capital. They recruit for technology roles and more. So within that one job posting, you'll be able to actually apply for those different routes, and they're going to you're going to basically submitting your profile as a candidate, and then they help match you from there. So even though there won't be a human capital internship posted in Doorways, you'll apply through their one internship that will likely be called strategy. EY, they're still working through their fall plans and they haven't gotten those in yet, but be sure to check Doorways for the most up-to-date information there. KPMG, most of their information is in Doorways. And then most of the below, it'll either be in here or they're still working on their plans. A lot of the smaller firms are still deciding what they're going to do this fall. So with that being said, I'd love to pivot to Doorways and show you how you can find all of this information. All right, so this is what you're going to see as a student when you're in the system, this profile right in here. The best way to receive the most up-to-date information and to have this tailored towards you is to update your career interests here or under my profile, and then you can go down here. And basically, if you're interested in consulting or in other industries, you'll really want to update that section so that these bulletins that pass by and the different bulletins here, those will be tailored towards your interests. In terms of if you're just looking to get an overview of what recruiting's like, even outside of consulting, you can go to this calendar feature. It can pull up in list form. You can do a week view, a month view. And what will happen is if you go to this week view, you'll see resume drops, which would be where you submit your application to a job posting or for a coffee chat. Those dates will be located up here, or if it's an on-campus interview, you'll see that here as well. So let's just search an employer. Let's go with McKinsey. So you can see their active job postings here. You can click on the employer McKinsey there. And if you wanted to view all of their upcoming sessions, you would click view more, and then you would be able to look at every one of the sessions. Now, under McKinsey's profile as an employer, you can see available positions listed, and you can see if they are participating in any career fairs, past VU postings, what they've posted for in the past, and if they have a public contact, they'll post that here. Laura Lee is no longer the recruiter, they just changed. So her contact information is out of date, but if an employer does have up-to-date contact information, it's always worth checking that contact spot.
And you wanted to say, like, on the employer screen, you can also, where that little star is, you can favorite that company. So you can, any companies on your list, your aspirational companies that you're interested in, you can certainly favorite those just to, it'll like the other thing, there's a lot of kind of algorithm behind doorways, and so it'll recognize that you've taken that action and starred that. So in this case, McKinsey, that can be helpful.
Yep. So if I were to star McKinsey, again, when they post positions or have events posted in doorways, those would pop up on your screen and be more accessible to you. So definitely recommend customizing this as much as possible to help keep you up to date on all the information. Like I said, this information is super fluid and is constantly changing. That also goes for headcount. Right now, we're seeing that pretty much all the firms that were recruiting here last year are still recruiting again this year for interns. Full time, from what we're getting a pulse of, it's going to be a lot more competitive this year. Just wanted to give you all a heads up that most of the companies are still recruiting. Don't be discouraged by the COVID situation. But we've got a lot of great companies coming on campus virtually this fall. We're going to have information sessions all scheduled all throughout, probably until November for consulting. And then we'll also have the virtual career fairs that you should attend as well. I have a couple of questions come through. Let's see. Is there a way we could know which companies sponsor international students? Ethan, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, that's a great question. We get that all the time. It is a bit challenging with some companies, and that we're not totally sure. Some companies will just make a statement that we are no longer able to sponsor undergraduate, full-time or opportunities. But that's, again, a fluid situation. You can, and sometimes there is a back door. So they might say, we really don't sponsor, but for the right student that they could make it happen. So there's not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but we do not have, this is all company information. And so they dictate what is posted in doorways. So we really don't have a way to screen, are they accepting international student applications or not? When we have traditionally when we've had the on-campus career fair, we're able to ask them to put up a little flag to indicate that. But I'm not sure about that in the virtual environment. But I know that's a super frustrating thing for our international student population at Vanderbilt.
Yeah, so most employers too will be filling out the section on their career fair registration indicating whether or not they'll be sponsoring or what their status is with hiring international students. So be sure to check that out too. It's not always 100% accurate because of, like Ethan said, sometimes the situations are fluid, but it definitely gives you a good basis for kind of the general understanding.
And if you attended a information session and they had a question and answer, certainly you could ask the recruiter. That's a totally appropriate question to ask in an information session, firm specific. So this is going to be firm specific. You give a blanket statement about consulting as an industry.
Yeah. And a couple of you have asked for the guide. If you email Ethan, I dropped his email address in the chat. If you'll email him, he can send it directly to you. Another question that came in was, do you apply for the internship through Doorways or through the consulting firm's website? That's a super great question. I recommend applying in both places. Oftentimes, job postings in Doorways will direct you to the company's website. A lot of that has to do with their data tracking, and they want you to apply directly through their site so they have your candidate profile. But sometimes employers will have you drop your resume in Doorways too. So if you see the option to apply in Doorways, absolutely be checking Doorways, because that will be the most, that will be where employers look most closely for Vanderbilt students. But if you also see a job posting that's not posted in Doorways, that's on a company's website, feel free to go ahead and apply through their website, even if they may be posting through Doorways in the coming weeks. Better to cover your bases than what you had. A couple more questions come in. There have been some questions about the timeline and whether or not that will change. Really, timeline hasn't changed very much for consulting. In fact, I would say it's moved up a week or two for most firms. So be constantly vigilant this fall. Really, that's going to be the main recruiting season. Though some companies will be recruiting this spring, most of that will take place this fall. Let's see. Ethan, I'm going to make you the host again so you can read the
And
question.
I would like to, I want to follow up what Ann was saying. So I'll give you an example of, we talk about on-campus recruiting as a bubble. So that's one element versus just applying to a consulting firm. So I'll give you an example. Accenture is a firm, they've come to campus a number of years ago, but they've decided for a number of different reasons that they're not going to come directly looking for Vandy students. But that doesn't mean you can't apply to Accenture. It means you'll just have to go to their main website there, and then you're gonna have to network like crazy. So some firms, and this is a trend, I think Ann would agree, a trend that we're gonna see a little bit more of each year that passes, is where firms want to have a little bit more what they would call school agnostic, where they're going to be less tied to one specific school. And so it's going to, with this virtual interviewing, doing things through Zoom or online, it's going to open it up. And so while we still have these great relationships with certain companies, just because you see a company like Accenture is not coming specifically for Vandy students, does not exclude you from putting your name in the hat in terms of their main. So you would apply through Accenture, their portal, but then it really key is to network with some individuals in various offices. And we have quite a few Vandy alum at Accenture in most of these firms. So I want to make the distinction between something like a Deloitte, which has a heavy emphasis on Vanderbilt and still, does a lot, has lots of events that are specific to Vanderbilt. So certainly apply there and take full advantage of our great team, Ann and the rest of the team at the employee relations for our on-campus elements. But so I just wanted to say that there. We just got about 7 minutes, and so I want to touch base a little bit about kind of prepping and next steps. So you guys have this sheet. Again, I can't overemphasize enough. It's your responsibility to update. I just sent everybody that was had RSVP'd on this call about 3 o'clock. I sent you the guide in a Word document so you can get in there and change the dates as you find them to update that as you see fit. I also sent you a management consulted 4-week prep plan. So with the email, so if you're not registered with Management Consulted, I was just on a call with Sam, one of our panelists today, and he said he really liked those materials. We pay for a subscription to Management Consulted. As with any tool, it's only as good as you make it. And so there's so much information on there. There's lots of videos, as Sam was saying. You can watch videos on there to watch people do casing. They have information about resumes. You can even look at certain cases for certain firms. They have a case bank. So that the sheet that I sent out today, the 4-week prep plan, is really for those students who need that month-long sprint. I gotta make it happen. I haven't been working on this too much. And then some of the other resources I sent along is a link to the Vault Guide, which we have, again, subscription to. They have some materials about consulting, the industry, they have a great consulting guide to the firms and give you a background on some of the firms. I also encourage, and I think some students forget this, is most firms on their career site do have a interview prep section. So whether it's Bain, Deloitte, or any of the major firms, they'll have a case prep part of their website, which I would encourage you to do. So once you learn the basics, then you want to go in and say, like, KPMG, how do they handle it? Usually they have a video there. What kind of cases, what makes a good case? What makes a great case? So that's another resource. And just so you know, I will be giving out free, we have a limited supply, but we have quite a few hard copies of Case in Point. And I'll be giving those out tomorrow night, 5 to 7 in the SLC Plaza between SLC and the Art Building. We're gonna have tables out there, Career Center, everybody mask up, we're gonna social distance, and we have t-shirts, hats, swag, candy, but also I'll be giving out Case in Point books, free for any student that wants to stop by and pick one up. And so those are kind of your guides. And like most of the panelists said, once you learn the basics, it's really just getting the repetitions in. So finding the case buddy, I would say, is action item number 1 if you haven't done that already. With that, any last questions that anybody has? Got about 4 minutes before we wrap up. Give you time for a question or two while Ann and I are on the call.
Ethan, we had a lot of students ask if they are a rising senior or senior this year or even a sophomore, how can they stand out in the process for an internship or even a full-time opportunity when those roles may be more competitive right now?
Yeah, so no matter what we all at the Career Center, we coach by major. So I would encourage you to meet with your coach. Many of our coaches have experience working with students, like helping you tell your story related to consulting. So the kind of big areas, if you want to be able to stand out, is based on the experience you do have. You want to be able to show personal impact. So these are the big ticket items for consulting that you want to stand out. And so you would want to reflect these in your resume and just deepen your understanding of your own experience and how I'm going to articulate this. Personal impact, problem solver, entrepreneurial, quantitative skills, and leadership. Those are kind of 5 areas that you would want in terms of stand out. So if I'm in a student organization and I improved some process that they had, then it was, that organization was better because I was there. And so this is where your coach can help you refine your resume, tell those stories to reflect some of those things back to the firms. And then it's really putting in your time and talking to people at the firms that you might be interested in to find out from the people who work there day to day about the culture, the inside track, what are particular skill sets that they value, those kinds of things. So that networking, career conversation element is going to be huge in terms of really honing your ability to articulate why you should be at that firm. Any other questions?
Another quick answer to a question I had come in. There is an alumni job, or not job posting, alumni database with their contact information. It's called VU Connect. You're able to email alumni through that page. LinkedIn is also a really great source to find Vanderbilt alumni. And if you meet with your career coach, they can help you figure out your best strategy for reaching out to alumni and networking. And they'll also help you with the more logistical information on how to, find those pages, how to find alumni on LinkedIn, how to message them. So be sure to schedule an appointment with your coach if you have any questions there.
And I'll just, the last one of the questions, what do you recommend for first year students? Well, welcome to Vandy. One thing, like here, day 2, you're already hop on a consulting prep session, but that's awesome. I would just say get acclimated. As you heard many of the panelists say, like do well, pursue your interests and, do that with zeal. I would say just in terms of action steps, in terms of building skills, it's really related to those things I was just saying, like enhance your quantitative ability, take on leadership roles, entrepreneurial. So, that doesn't mean you got to start a business or, start an app or anything like that. It just means think about opportunities to be involved where you can innovate, you can work on teams. Team-based projects are always a plus. So if you can get an opportunity to do that. But like I said, when in doubt, this would be what I leave on, the note I leave on. When in doubt, do more networking, more career conversations. So if you're like, what else could I do? Let me talk to some more people who do this, and you're going to help you enhance your understanding of the industry, the firm, and is this the right fit for you, and what skills should I develop? So thank